Book 9, entitled Awakening by Light, is an expanding vision unfolding within light issuing from Buddha's feet. The light progressively illumines greater and greater numbers of worlds as it travels further and further into space, radiating in all directions, revealing similar structures and parallel events in each world. In every world are immense numbers of Buddhas who each attract 10 great enlightening beings, one from each of the 10 directions, who in turn are each accompanied by countless enlightening beings. When the assemblies have all been arrayed, one of each group of 10 great enlightening beings chants descriptive eulogies of the Buddha, alluding to the acts and realities of Buddhahood. Here again is emphasized the identity of Buddha with truth and ultimate reality, the transcendental nature of the essence of Buddha. Book 9, Awakening by Light. Then the Buddha, from beneath the wheel marks on his feet, emitted 100 billion light beams, illuminating this billion-world universe, with its 400 billion continents, 100 billion oceans, 100 billion surrounding mountain ranges, 100 billion enlightening beings being born, 100 billion enlightening beings leaving home, 100 billion Buddhas realizing true enlightenment, 100 billion Buddhas teaching, 100 billion Buddhas passing away, 100 billion polar mountain kings, 100 billion heavens of hosts of celestial kings, 100 billion heavens of 33 celestial realms, 100 billion heavens of timely portion, 100 billion heavens of satisfaction, 100 billion heavens of enjoyment of emanations, 100 billion heavens of free enjoyment of others' emanations, 100 billion heavens of pure hosts, 100 billion light sound heavens, 100 billion heavens of purity, 100 billion heavens of vast rewards, 100 billion heavens of the ultimate of form. Everything therein was all clearly manifest. As in this place the Buddha, the world-honored one, was seen sitting on a lotus bank lion throne, surrounded by as many enlightening beings as atoms in 10 Buddhalands, so also sat the 100 billion Buddhas in 100 billion continents. In each case, because of the spiritual force of the Buddhas, in each of the 10 directions was a great enlightening being, each with a company of as many enlightening beings as atoms in 10 Buddhalands who came to the Buddha. Their names were Manjushri, Chief of the Awakened, Chief in riches of truth, Chief of the precious, Chief of the virtuous, Chief in vision, Chief in effort, Chief in doctrine, Chief in knowledge, and Chief in goodness. The lands from whence these enlightening beings came were respectively called Golden World, Sublime Color World, Lotus Color World, Saffron Flower Color World, Blue Lotus Color World, Gold Color World, Jewel Color World, Diamond Color World, Crystal Color World, and Equal Color World. These enlightening beings had each cultivated pure practice in the company of Buddhas, the Buddha of immutable knowledge, the Buddha of unhindered knowledge, the Buddha of knowledge of liberation, the Buddha of knowledge of dignified conduct, the Buddha of knowledge of characteristics, the Buddha of ultimate knowledge, the Buddha of supreme knowledge, the Buddha of independent knowledge, the Buddha of pure knowledge, and the Buddha of observing knowledge. Then the Manjushris in all places, in the presence of each of the Buddhas, spoke up simultaneously and said in verse, "If any see the truly awake as becoming liberated and divorced from taints, and not attached to any world. They have not realized the eye of the way. If any know the Buddha's substance and form have no existence, and by cultivation gain clear understanding, such people will soon be Buddhas. Who can see this world unstirred in mind, and likewise Buddha's body, will attain supreme knowledge. If regarding the Buddha in truth one understands that they are equal, having no thought of duality, one will walk on the inconceivable plane. If one sees the Buddha in oneself resting in equality, without abode, entering nowhere, one will become one of the rare. Form and feeling have no sets, nor do conception, action, consciousness. Any who can know this way will become great sages. Whether mundane or transmundane views, having risen beyond them all, while well able to know the truth, one will become a great illuminate. If toward omniscience one engenders dedication, seeing mind without origination, one will gain the greatest name. Living beings have no birth, nor either any decay. If one attains such knowledge as this, one will realize the unexcelled way. In one understanding infinity, within infinity, one. Realizing their origins interdependent, one will attain to fearlessness. Then the light beams passed this world and illuminated 10 lands in the eastern direction, also doing likewise in the south, west, north, the 4 intermediate directions, and the zenith and the nadir. In all of those worlds were 100 billion continents called Jambudvipa, and so on, including 100 billion heavens of the ultimate of form. Everything in all those realms was clearly revealed. In each of the Jambudvipa continents, the Buddha was seen sitting on a lotus bank lion throne, surrounded by as many enlightening beings as atoms in 10 Buddhalands. And in each one, due to the spiritual force of the Buddha, 10 great enlightening beings from the 10 directions, each accompanied by as many enlightening beings as atoms in 10 Buddhalands, came to the Buddha. Those enlightening beings were called Manjushri, etc. The lands they came from were called golden, etc. And the Buddhas they served were called immutable knowledge, etc. Then the Manjushris in all those places, each in the presence of the Buddha in that place, all simultaneously spoke out, saying these verses. Sentient beings lack wisdom, wounded and poisoned by the thorns of craving. For their sake we seek enlightenment. Such is the law of all Buddhas. Seeing all things, giving up extremes, once enlightened, never regressing, they turn the incomparable wheel of truth. For inconceivable eons, cultivating various practices vigorously in order to liberate beings, this is the power of the great sages. The guide conquers demons bravely and invincibly, preaching subtle truths in his light because of kind compassion. By knowledge and wisdom, breaking the barriers of afflictions, in an instant seeing all. This is the spiritual power of Buddhas. Beating the drum of the great teaching, awakening all lands in the 10 directions, making all turn toward enlightenment. Independent power can act like this. Without breaking the infinite boundaries, traveling through the billions of lands, without attachment to any existent, such is freedom like the Buddhas. The Buddhas are like space, ultimately forever pure. Those who rejoice in remembering this will fulfill all of their vows. In each and every one of the hells they pass innumerable eons, In order to liberate sentient beings, they're able to bear these pains. Without begrudging body or life, always preserving the Buddha's teachings, with egoless mind harmonious, one can attain the enlightened way. Then the light beams passed 10 worlds and illuminated 100 lands in the eastern direction, also doing likewise in every other direction. In all of those worlds were 100 billion continents called Jambudvipa, and so on, including 100 billion heavens of the ultimate of form. Everything in all those realms was clearly revealed. In each of the Jambudvipa continents, the Buddha was seen sitting on a lotus bank lion throne, surrounded by as many enlightening beings as atoms in 10 Buddhalands. And in each one, due to the spiritual force of the Buddha, 10 great enlightening beings from the 10 directions, each accompanied by as many enlightening beings as atoms in 10 Buddhalands, came to the Buddha. Those enlightening beings were called Manjushri, etc. The lands they came from were called golden, etc. And the Buddhas they served were called immutable knowledge, etc. Then the Manjushris in all those places, each in the presence of the Buddha in that place, all simultaneously spoke out, saying these verses. Buddha understands things are like phantoms. Comprehending, he is unhindered. His mind is pure and free from attachments. He harmonizes and pacifies all beings. Some see him firstborn, his color like a mountain of gold. Living in his final body, he's forever a moon of humanity. Some see him walking around, replete with boundless virtues. Attention and intellect well employed, the great man walks like a lion. Some see his violet eyes gazing in the 10 directions. Sometimes he shows a smile to accommodate beings' wishes. Some see his lion roar, his supreme incomparable body, manifesting his last incarnation, speaking naught but the truth. Some see him leaving home, shedding all bonds, practicing the acts of Buddhas, always contemplating extinction. Some see him sitting on the enlightenment site, awakening knowledge of all things, reaching the other shore of all virtues, darkness and affliction ended. Some see the supreme man full of great compassion, turning the wheel of teaching, liberating numberless beings. Some see the lion roar, its awesome light unique, transcending all the worlds with peerless mystic power. Some see the mind at peace, like a lamp gone out forever. Variously manifesting spiritual mastery, the 10-powered one can be like this. Then the light beams passed 100 worlds, and illumined 1,000 worlds in each of the 10 directions. In all of those worlds were 100 billion continents called Jambudvipa, and so on, including 100 billion heavens of the ultimate of form. Everything in all those realms was clearly revealed. In each one of the Jambudvipa continents, the Buddha was seen sitting on a lotus bank lion throne, surrounded by as many enlightening beings as atoms in 10 Buddhalands. And in each one, due to the spiritual force of the Buddha, 10 great enlightening beings from the 10 directions, each accompanied by as many enlightening beings as atoms in 10 Buddhalands, came to the Buddha. Those enlightening beings were also called Manjushri, etc. The lands they came from were also called golden, etc. And the Buddhas they served were also called immutable knowledge, etc. Then the Manjushris in all those places simultaneously spoke up, saying these verses. The Buddha comprehends without peer the exceedingly profound truth. Sentient beings cannot understand, so he reveals it step by step. The nature of self has never existed, and possessions of self are also nil. So how come the enlightened ones are able to have their bodies? The liberated ones with knowledge and conduct are beyond category or compare. All the logic and reasoning of the world cannot find any fault in them. The Buddhas are not worldly clusters, elements, senses, born and dying things. Phenomenal sets cannot produce them. Thus they're called human lions. Their nature is fundamentally empty and inactive. They're liberated within and without. Detached from all delusive ideas, such is the peerless state. Their substance and nature never moves, selfless, no coming or going. Yet they can awaken the worlds, pacifying all without bound. They always enjoy contemplating extinction, uniform without duality. Their minds do not increase or decrease, yet manifest boundless powers. They do not do the deeds that cause results for sentient beings, yet can understand unhindered. Such is the enlightened way. All kinds of living beings transmigrate through all realms. Buddhas, not discriminating, liberate the boundless kinds. The Buddha's golden color is not existent, yet pervades all existences. According to the inclinations of beings, they teach them ultimate peace. Then the light beams passed 1,000 worlds and illuminated 10,000 worlds in all directions. In all those worlds were 100 billion continents called Jambudvipa, and so on, including 100 billion heavens of the ultimate of form. Everything in all those realms was clearly revealed. In each one of the Jambudvipa continents, the Buddha was seen sitting on a lotus bank lion throne, surrounded by as many enlightening beings as atoms in 10 Buddhalands. And in each one, due to the spiritual force of the Buddha, a great enlightening being from each of the 10 directions, each accompanied by as many enlightening beings as atoms in 10 Buddhalands, came to the Buddha. Those enlightening beings were also called Manjushri, etc. The lands they came from were also called golden, etc. And the Buddhas they served were also called immutable knowledge, etc. Then the Manjushris in all those places, each in the presence of the Buddha in that place, all simultaneously spoke out, saying these verses. Developing great compassion to save and protect all sentient beings, forever leaving human and celestial realms. This is what work should be done. Always with faith in the Buddha, the mind never regressing, associating with the enlightened ones. This is what work should be done. Intent on the virtues of Buddhahood, the will never receding, abiding in pure, cool wisdom. This is what work should be done. In all manner of activities, always remembering the Buddha's virtues, without ever a lapse, day or night. This is what work should be done. Observing the boundless past, present, and future, studying enlightened virtues without ever tiring of it. This is what work should be done. Observing the real characteristics of the body, all being void and nil, detaching from self with no egotism. This is what work should be done. A mind seeing beings as equal, not creating discrimination, entering the realm of real truth. This is what work should be done. Lifting up boundless worlds, drinking up all the oceans. This power of knowledge of psychic attainment is the kind of work that should be done. Contemplating the various lands, their material and immaterial aspects, able to know them all, this is what work should be done. The atoms of all lands everywhere are, each and every one, a Buddha. To be able to know their number, this is what work should be done. Then the light beams passed 10,000 worlds and illuminated 100,000 worlds in all directions. In all of those worlds were 100 billion continents called Jambudvipa, and so on, including 100 billion heavens of the ultimate of form. Everything in all those realms was clearly revealed. In each of the Jambudvipa continents, the Buddha was seen sitting on a lotus bank lion throne, surrounded by as many enlightening beings as atoms in 10 Buddhalands. And in each one, due to the spiritual force of the Buddha, a great enlightening being from each of the 10 directions, each accompanied by as many enlightening beings as atoms in 10 Buddhalands, came to the Buddha. Those enlightening beings were called Manjushri, etc. The lands they came from were called golden, etc. And the Buddhas they served were called immutable knowledge, etc. Then the Manjushris in all those places, each in the presence of the Buddha in that place, all simultaneously spoke out, saying these verses. If one sees the human tamer in terms of form or family, these are diseased eyes, perverted views. They can't know the supreme truth. The various formal characteristics of the Buddha cannot be assessed by any being. Though billions and trillions together calculate, those features and virtues are yet more boundless. The Buddha does not have forms as substance. It's just the formless quiescent state. Yet the physical forms and dignities are complete, seen by worldlings in accord with their wishes. The Buddha's reality is subtle and hard to fathom. No words or speech can reach it. It is not compounded or uncompounded. Its essential nature is void and formless. Buddha's body is unborn, beyond imagination. It is not a cluster of diverse elements. Having the power of freedom and certain insight, he travels the fearless, inexpressible path. Body and mind equanimous, liberated within and without, abiding forever in true awareness, he has no attachment, no bondage. The illumined one whose mind is pure acts without habituation. With the eye of knowledge reaching everywhere, he greatly aids living beings. One body is infinite, and the infinite too are one. Understanding all the worlds, he manifests forms everywhere. This body comes from nowhere, and accumulates nothing either. It is due to beings' discrimination that they see various bodies of Buddha. Mind discriminates worlds, but that mind has no existence. The enlightened know this truth, and thus see the Buddha body. Then the light beams passed 100,000 worlds and illumined 1,000,000 worlds in each of the 10 directions. In all of those worlds with 100 billion continents called Jambudvipa and so on, including 100 billion heavens of the ultimate of form, everything in all those realms was clearly revealed. In each of the Jambudvipa continents, the Buddha was seen sitting on a lotus bank lion throne, surrounded by as many enlightening beings as atoms in 10 Buddhalands. And in each one, due to the spiritual force of the Buddha, 10 great enlightening beings from the 10 directions, each accompanied by as many enlightening beings as atoms in 10 Buddhalands, came to the Buddha. Those enlightening beings were called Manjushri, etc. The lands they came from were called golden, etc. And the Buddhas they served were called immutable knowledge, etc. Then the Manjushris in all those places, each in the presence of the Buddha in that place, all simultaneously spoke out, saying these verses. The enlightened one most free, transcending the world, relying on nothing, replete with all virtues, liberates creatures from all states of being. Unaffected, unattached, without conceptions, resting nowhere, substance and essence immeasurable. Those who see all praise. Light pervasive, clear and pure, clearing away mundane afflictions, immutable beyond extremes. This is enlightened knowledge. Any who see the enlightened free from discrimination in body and mind will have no more doubts or hesitation in regard to anything. In all worlds, everywhere, turning the wheel of teaching, natureless, with nothing turned, the guide expounds expedients. Having no doubt as to truth, forever ending mental fabrication, not producing a discriminating mind, this is awareness of enlightenment. Comprehending different things, not sticking to verbal explanations, with no one or manifold, this is following Buddha's teaching. In many there's no oneness, neither has one plurality. Abandoning both of these, comprehensively enter the qualities of Buddhahood. Sentient beings and their lands are all completely null. With no reliance or discrimination, one can enter Buddha's enlightenment. Of sentient beings and lands, unity or difference cannot be found. Insightfully seeing like this is called knowing the meaning of Buddha's teaching. Then the light beams passed 1,000,000 worlds and illuminated 1,000,000,000 worlds in each of the 10 directions. In all of those worlds were 100 billion continents called Jambudvipa, and so on, including 100 billion heavens of the ultimate of form. Everything in all those realms was clearly revealed. In each of the Jambudvipa continents, the Buddha was seen sitting on a lotus bank lion throne, surrounded by as many enlightening beings as atoms in 10 Buddhalands. And in each one, due to the spiritual force of the Buddha, a great enlightening being from each of the 10 directions, each accompanied by as many enlightening beings as atoms in 10 Buddhalands, came to the Buddha. Those great enlightening beings were called Manjushri, etc. The lands they came from were called golden, etc. And the Buddhas they served were called immutable knowledge, etc. Then the Manjushris in all those places, each in the presence of the Buddha in that place, all simultaneously spoke out, saying these verses. Wisdom peerless, teaching boundless, gone beyond the sea of existences, reaching the other shore, lifespan and radiance without compare. This is the power of the virtuous one's skill. Clearly understanding all the Buddha's teachings, always observing all times tirelessly, even when perceiving objects not discriminating. This is the power of the inconceivable one's skill. Contemplating sentient beings without any concept thereof, observing all existences without such ideas, always abiding in meditative stillness yet not binding the mind. This is the power of skill of unhindered wisdom. Skillfully comprehending all things, with right mindfulness diligently cultivating the path of nirvana, enjoying liberation, divorcing partiality. This is the power of skill of the peaceful, dispassionate one. If any can exhort to complete enlightenment, heading for all knowledge of the cosmos, and influence beings to enter into truth, this is the power of skill of dwelling in the Buddha mind. Able to enter into all truths the Buddhas teach, with vast knowledge and wisdom unobstructed, able to arrive at every destination, this is the power of skill of cultivation of freedom. Always abiding in nirvana like empty space, able to transform and appear anywhere at will. This is creating form based on the formless, the power of skill of the one who reaches the hard to reach. Day and night, day and month, year and era, the signs of the beginning and end, formation and disintegration of the worlds. Remembering and thoroughly knowing these is the power of skill of knowledge of measures of time. All living beings have birth and death, material and immaterial, thinking or unthinking. Knowing all the various names is the power of skill of abiding in the inconceivable. Of past, present, and future times, understanding all that's said, yet knowing all times are equal. This is the power of skill of incomparable understanding. Then the light beams passed 1 billion worlds and illuminated 10 billion worlds in each of the 10 directions. In all of those worlds were 100 billion continents called Jambudvipa and so on, including 100 billion heavens of the ultimate of form. Everything in all those realms was clearly revealed. In each of the Jambudvipa continents, the Buddha was seen sitting on a lotus bank lion throne, surrounded by as many enlightening beings as atoms in 10 Buddhalands. And in each one, due to the spiritual force of the Buddha, 10 great enlightening beings from the 10 directions, each accompanied by as many enlightening beings as atoms in 10 Buddhalands, came to the Buddha. Those great enlightening beings were called Manjushri, etc. The lands they came from were called golden, etc. And the Buddhas they served were called immutable knowledge, etc. Then the Manjushris in all those places, each in the presence of the Buddha in that place, all simultaneously spoke out, saying these verses. Having cultivated extensive difficult practices, diligently working day and night, having crossed the hard to cross with a lion's roar, teaching all beings, this is the practice. Sentient beings whirl in the sea of craving and greed, shrouded by the web of ignorance, terribly oppressed. The most benevolent bravely cuts it all away. We vow to also do so. This is the practice. Worldlings have no control, attached to sense desires. Falsely discriminating, they suffer myriad pains. Practicing the Buddha's teaching, always control the mind, vowing to cross over this. This is the practice. Sentient beings attached to self enter birth and death. Looking for a limit to this, none can be found. Serving all the enlightened to obtain the wondrous teaching, explain it to others. This is the practice. Living beings are helpless, wrapped up in sickness, forever sunk in evil ways, producing the 3 poisons, the fierce flames of a great fire always burning them. With a pure heart to rescue them, this is the practice. Sentient beings confused have lost the right path. Always going the wrong way, they enter the house of darkness. For their sake lighting the lamp of truth, to be a light forever. This is the practice. Sentient beings bob and sink in the ocean of existences. Their troubles are boundless. They have no place to rest. To make for them an ark of truth, to ferry them over. This is the practice. Sentient beings are ignorant and don't see the fundamental. Confused, foolish, crazed, in the midst of danger and difficulty. Buddhas pity them and set up a bridge of teaching with right awareness to let them climb. This is the practice. Seeing beings on perilous paths, oppressed by the pains of age, illness, and death, develop unlimited skill and means and pledge to save them all. This is the practice. Hearing the truth, believing without doubt, comprehending essential emptiness without shock or fear, appearing in all realms in appropriate forms, teach all the deluded. This is the practice. Then the light beams passed 10 billion worlds and illuminated in all 10 directions 100 billion worlds, 1 trillion worlds, 100 trillion worlds, a quadrillion worlds, 100 quadrillion worlds, a quintillion worlds, 100 quintillion worlds. In this way, countless, unquantifiable, boundless, incomparable, uncountable, unaccountable, unthinkable, immeasurable, unspeakable numbers of worlds, to the utmost extent of the realm of space of the cosmos, in all 10 directions were likewise illumined. In all of those worlds were 100 billion continents called Jambudvipa and so on, including 100 billion heavens of the ultimate of form. Everything in all those realms was clearly revealed. In each of the Jambudvipa continents, the Buddha was seen sitting on a lotus bank lion throne, surrounded by as many enlightening beings as atoms in 10 Buddhalands. And in each one, due to the spiritual force of the Buddha, a great enlightening being from each of the 10 directions, each accompanied by as many enlightening beings as atoms in 10 Buddhalands, came to the Buddha. Those great enlightening beings were called Manjushri, etc. The lands they came from were called golden, etc. And the Buddhas they served were called immutable knowledge, etc. Then the Manjushris in all those places, each in the presence of the Buddha in that place, all simultaneously spoke out, saying these verses. In one instant observing measureless eons, without going, coming, or dwelling, thus comprehending the events of past, present, and future, Buddhas transcend expedience and fulfill 10 powers. With incomparable good repute in all quarters, forever out of trouble, always rejoicing, they go to all lands to explain such a teaching for all. For the benefit of beings they supported the enlightened, attaining a comparable result according to their will. Readily acknowledging all truths, they reveal spiritual powers everywhere. From their first offerings to the enlightened, their minds were flexible and patient. They entered deep meditative concentration and observed the nature of things, exhorting all beings to aspire to enlightenment. Through this they speedily attained the unexcelled reward. Who seeks truth everywhere with undivided mind to cultivate virtues to full maturity, eliminating all duality of being and non-being. Such people truly see the Buddha. Going to all lands in all directions, expounding the sublime teaching for the welfare of the many, abiding in reality without any wavering, such people's virtues are the same as Buddha. The cycles of wondrous teaching turned by the Buddhas are all aspects of enlightenment. If one, having heard, can realize the nature of things, such a person will always see Buddha. If one does not see the 10-powered as empty, phantom-like, though one sees not, as though blind. Discriminating and grasping forms, one does not see Buddha. Having finally divorced attachment, then can one see. Sentient beings are variously different according to their actions. In the 10 directions, inside and out, it's hard to see them all. The Buddha body's unhindered, pervading all directions, and cannot be completely seen in just the same way. Like unto the infinite worlds in space, without coming or going, pervading the 10 directions, becoming and disintegrating, having no resting place, so does Buddha pervade space in the same way.